The DIESOL podcast.
Digital integration in English as a second or other language. Or
Developing innovation in English as a second or other language. Episode 61.
welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 61. We are your hosts. I'm Brent Warner.
And I'm Michelle Reyes. Holy moly.
Ooh, it's been a while.
It has been a while. Hey, Brent, how are you doing?
I am holding up okay. So last time we talked, you were in Japan.
I was. I'm back. I'm back home. I'm back in Texas.
Yeah, and also we kind of put a little pause on the show for a few reasons. We weren't able to totally bring everybody up to speed, but I think we can talk a bit about it now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One, I mean, right away, the Ukraine thing was,
That was too heavy.
It was heavy.
I mean, it still is.
Yeah,
It still is.
it
It's still
wasn't as
going on.
distracting, and there's a lot there, and including students. I have students on both sides of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's been very confusing and tricky to deal with. But also,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's that in itself, and then other conflicts going on, and then I was coming back, and my niece passed away, and
Yeah.
I don't. She was very young. She passed away from leukemia. It was sudden and unexpected, and so that it was just a difficult time.
Yeah, and so we kind of want to just to briefly talk about that because I mean that's quite heavy and there's a lot going on around that. But also we didn't exactly want to apologize for pausing the show because of that, because we think I mean we were doing a little pre-showy show, but you had some good thoughts about why it's important to be able to accept those things and not necessarily push through and do the things you're not ready to do at the moment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens when any kind of traumatic event presents itself in life, whether it's war or whatever it is, because there's just all of us are dealing with our own situations, but especially in the teaching field, many of us feel like we have to push through, we have to stay strong, we have to keep going, and society, especially in the teaching field, has conditioned us to work that way.
Mm-hmm.
And although it may be well-intentioned, people telling you, stay strong, you can do it, you can do this, just push through, it actually invalidates how vulnerable you may be feeling. And I think of, students that are, have families elsewhere, or are going through situations that may not be a war necessarily, but it's something at home. And for us to feel like we are less than ourselves because we're not, quote unquote, being strong,
Mm-hmm.
then we are left with guilt and shame, and we feel bad about what we're doing or not doing. And then we don't give ourselves permission to actually just be in our vulnerable time, where for me, it happened to be mourning my niece. And I have to say, I have to give just a heartfelt thank you to my PLN, because I did tweet about her on social media, and people just sent messages. They donated to her fund. And I knew a lot of people didn't want to have their full name out in public. So I know that there's a lot of you out there who donated privately, and that just goes such a long way when someone is feeling vulnerable. But if I, as an educator, cannot admit my times of weakness or the times where I do need help, then it's going to be really difficult for me to model that for other young people. And at this time, it happens to be the sister of my niece who passed away, and other little cousins. So, and of course, my students, our students and my colleagues. I want my colleagues to be able to do the same for me. And so that's sort of where our conversation was before the show started.
Yeah. And I thought, a few of those things were just really valuable and worth paying attention to, because, sometimes for us, we're probably like go-getters at certain levels
Yeah.
with the show and trying to say, hey, we want to keep providing and hopefully it's useful for people. But at the end of the day, it's a show, and like it's
Mm-hmm.
your own health and our own needs. And I've been dealing with my own, like, you know, not luckily, grateful that there haven't been deaths in my family or anything like that. And really feel for your situation, but we're all dealing with different things, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been somewhat stressed around, I've just been stepping into my own my own levels of burnout around online teaching and all of
Mm-hmm.
those types of things as well. So I think it's just kind of worthwhile and valuable to validate that. And
Absolutely.
we need to put both sides of it too, right? Because I liked what you were saying about, this idea of be strong, right? It's like, well, okay, but does strong mean burying your emotions and just smiling when you're not wanting to smile?
Mm-hmm.
And I think by default, at least in American culture, that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what it means, right? It's like, just don't show anybody that you're upset, or and that's
The show must go on, right?
right.
Suck it up. And yeah, I heard a lot of, that, I mean, and yes, it's well intended, but like, here's the thing, you're dealing with stuff as well.
Mhm.
And that does it just, none of everybody's stuff is valid.
Right.
And the thing is that we need to be able to communicate how we're feeling so that we know when we need a break. We know when we need to offer students a break. We need to know when we need to offer our colleagues a break, or be there for them in the way that we can support them. And so I think that that's extremely important, because it keeps us from burning out, and it keeps us having that fire within to continue when we've got the space to continue.
Yeah. Yeah, these are great. One of the things you posted early on, Esol, I think on Instagram, was you had this post that had like two slides to it, or two pictures to it. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
how to support someone who's grieving. Don't say this and do say
Mm-hmm.
this, right? And I thought that was like really, really insightful, because it's like it said the same things, like, you're strong, right? Or you're going to be fine. And it's like,
Yeah, and that's it's funny because I came up with these with my niece, because she was there when my niece Monica, who passed away, she was there when she passed away. And people kept telling her, wow, we're so proud of you, did so well, you were so strong. And that left her feeling defeated. She said, all I did was hold her hand. I didn't do anything. I couldn't even speak. I was in so much shock. And so a lot of people from all over the world reached out, because they knew my niece. She had come to work, and she had met my students. She was friends with some of my students, etc. She'd practice English with them. And so we decided, okay, what does help us? Well, the thing is, we just want to know that people understand that we're going through a difficult time, and that they are there with us. They feel for us, and that's all they have to say. And so I also, after I posted that, I received several messages from people from different parts of the world saying, thank you so much for sharing this, because I would not have known. And these are things that are difficult for me to know as someone from another country. And had I not posted that, that conversation wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. And I think it's not only not from another country. I think a lot of people from here just kind of default to these responses that were like,
oh yeah, I'm sorry for your loss. My condolences. It's like, well, those are like Hallmark card things, but if you get a Hallmark card thing with condolences, it's just, it sounds so, the person who's grieving, of course, appreciates, but what helps is, I'm with you in your mourning. I'm with you during this time. And so that just feels like a pillow when you need it,
Yeah, for sure. So I think with all of these kind of ideas in mind, we've been going through some changes here. We've been kind of dealing with some issues, and we're like, well, what are we gonna do? Some of the issues we'll talk about in just a minute, of like things that were going on with you in Japan as well, can possibly lead to change, right? And hopefully for better
Absolutely.
change, and kind of motivate a little bit of updates and a little bit of new ways of approaching things. So I think we're just going to jump right over and start talking about it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so if you didn't hear, if you weren't an eagle-eared viewer, is that is that a thing that we can say? So at the beginning of the show, the DIESOL, the acronym is digital integration in English as a second or other language, but we are shifting.
No, we're evolving like a Pokemon.
What does it? I gave a great analogy. I said we're shifting gears, like the keeping the car analogy alive, and you went into Pokemon. Okay. All right. So
shifting gears.
Shifting Pokemon grow. I don't even know what that means. They get bigger or something.
They become more powerful and strong, and they adapt to what is needed at the moment.
Oh, okay. Well, we can work with that, I guess.
But we can adapt to the road too by shifting gears.
All right. So let's repeat this. So we are changing the acronym meaning a bit here. And
I'm excited about this, actually.
Cool. Okay.
I'm pretty excited about this.
So what is it? What's the new one?
The new one is developing innovation in English as a second or other language. So we're keeping the D and the I for DIESOL, but we are adding those words or changing them so that we're expanding and including other areas that I think we talk about often. Brent, you and I talk about often, but they never make it on the show because they're not digital integration every time, but they're equally as useful and relevant. And so, developing innovation in English as a second or other language, that's more letters. We're adding letters.
Uh-oh. We're going to have to see if we can squeeze it onto the t-shirt or something. I don't know. So I like this. I like it a lot, actually. I think we're going to have some good opportunities here because we have talked about some things, that are not super digital on the show. We've kind of gone in some waves and different parts like that. But I think one of the things is we have held off on a lot of conversations, right? So we've done some things a little bit here, but then I've always kind of come back and said, well, hold on a second. What's our online aspect to this? What's the technology that we're linking into this conversation? And even though they're really valuable conversations, things like, DEI issues or no tech classrooms or all sorts of
reality.
Things. Yeah, there's so many different parts that we can talk about that our field still needs to keep growing a lot, right? Like there's so many different places. And so when we say developing innovation, right? The innovation is great because we can kind of keep thinking about new things and keep trying to figure out new interesting ways to approach and work with our students. But I also like that developing has kind of the present progressive sense of we are always developing innovation, right? We ourselves are developing, right? And the world out there is also developing as well. So it kind of helps us have that flexibility while still being able to absolutely focus on the tech stuff where we need to, right? And so I think we're not losing that side of it. We're just saying, hey, we're not pigeonholed.
We're adding. Yeah, we are adding. I feel like we've just expanded and some of the conversations that I wanted to have in our field didn't really belong within digital integration, but it definitely belong with innovation and developing. And the fact, absolutely. We didn't stop growing at the pandemic with Zoom classes, right? So now we know how not to do them. And some of us do. And also that in other parts of the world, they didn't have Zoom teaching. And that's what I figured out in Japan. Yeah. So
tell me a little bit about that time in Japan, because we're trying to talk tech, right? And you're sitting there going, but Brent, I'm not using any tech.
Well, yeah. So here's one of the common, people make comments to me, and here's a comment that was quite common. Oh, you're going to Japan, or you're going to love it because you're such a techie. And yes, Japan is at the cutting edge of technology. However, their language classrooms and their education style in general is very much the old teacher-centered.
Very, very teacher-centered.
Yeah, especially in language learning, it's very much translation method.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me, I'm getting over the flu. My technology there, and it hasn't been the first time where I'm overseas, but people would be surprised to know that all I had was a whiteboard, a few whiteboard markers, and my desk, and that is it. There was a cassette player.
Mm-hmm.
I actually found old cassettes, and they had actually like new ones that you could use to record. I kid you not. They had new ones in stock if I needed them.
Blank cassettes?
Blank cassettes.
Wow.
Blank cassettes. They had VHS, a VCR.
Really? Not a DVD player?
They also had a DVD player, but we did, I think some of the really old school English textbooks that they use still have only the VHS because they went out of print.
Okay.
So again, that should tell you. And so one of the things that's both disappointing and exciting is that, oh my gosh, there is no tech. What the heck am I going to do? And then, oh my gosh, I get to design and try new things all over again and make things. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of that feeling. I had to do everything from scratch. It was very much paper and pencil. Designing games, all sorts of games, because we also had a long schedule. And again, that's just expected. But if you're having a long schedule of activities, that's wearing on the students who are used to sitting in their desks quietly translating for hours. So I sort of went back to basics. I went back to when I first started teaching and understanding that not everybody, and we've talked about this before, not everyone in other places, even in the United States, has technology available. Yeah. So it was kind of an eye-opening experience, and it was very much kind of led me to thinking a lot about our show when we were, coming up with ideas. I just didn't have a lot to share because I wasn't trying a lot in terms of digital tools. And so again, that reinforces the idea that innovation doesn't necessarily have to be with things you plug in.
Well, and also during that time, Esol, you were telling me, you're like, yeah, I'm not doing this stuff. But then you were also saying, and you know what, thinking about it, like people who maybe would listen to the show, but they don't feel like they have access to this or that, right? Like all the things that we're talking about.
And there have been. I know that we've had when we were on, oh my gosh, how could I be forgetting? What's that other platform we did? Clubhouse. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Clubhouse is still there. Yeah. But anyway, when we were on Clubhouse, we did have listeners who shared, but they said, they don't have technology. And that's the thing. Oftentimes you're working with, you have part-time teachers, and they may not get the classroom that's the tech classroom. And so, or they may be freeway flyers, as part-timers often are. And when you're not able to develop a lot of the other stuff because you can't take it with you all the time, depending on the technology in the classroom. So we really you and I had a conversation of, what is innovation? Because innovation for us here in America might be one thing, but innovation in Japan or, other countries, Uzbekistan, for example, might be different.
Yeah. And people, so for example, we might have already gone through some of those innovations, but that doesn't mean like we can still talk about those, right? Because we can help, hopefully, people who are, let's just say Uzbekistan, like, hey, I want to start doing this. Like, this is our first, we have, we're out here in the countryside and we have one computer in the classroom that doesn't connect to the internet. Can I do anything with that? And it's like, oh, okay, well, let's start thinking about different ways to do that, right? Or like, just like you said, we don't have anything.
Just implementing a brand new program and setting things up and knowing what segments, what you need. And of course, as a new teacher, you're taught all of these things, but teachers who are there's a lot of teachers who are, overseas, or maybe not overseas. They're just teachers that live there. I don't want to say only Americans go and teach overseas. We have plenty of excellent language teachers.
Well, and the other thing too is like we have a lot of teachers here in the States that don't have wealthy schools, right? They don't have like,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have access to the things that we're talking about. So even though we say, oh, it's easy to go get a computer for $200 or whatever it is, right? For some people, that can be totally unrealistic. And for a whole community of students, right? Like they might not have access to that. So we have to be careful that we're not making the total assumptions. And again, like I said, yes, we're going to keep talking about that stuff because we love it. And there are a lot of great ways to go, but also like we want to be open to more beyond that. So I think that's kind of what we're leaning towards here with this conversation. And so we'll see how the show kind of progresses and moves and what conversations we end up having going forward. But I feel pretty good about it. I feel like we can, refresh a bit and take new steps back into it, but with a little bit more open eyes.
We have evolved.
We have Pokemon'd up.
I mean, we've only shifted gears. That sounds like we moved a little bit.
I don't know. I mean, like you get the right gear shift, and you're gonna get a big herky jerky.
Unless we're a flying car, man.
All right.
Are we a flying car?
Oh, I mean, definitely our sound effects are not like eco-friendly. We'll make it work.
All right. So, hey guys, if you think you have friends out there that might benefit from the show now that we're expanding, share the show and let them know about our new name change.
Thank you. All right. So, Esol, we did talk a little bit, we wanted to say here, I think one issue that has also come up for a lot of us during this time is that we feel like less creative, or I've felt less creative over the last couple of years because we're just kind of stuck in the Zoom fatigue, and we talked a little bit about that in the past and some of those. But I thought it might be useful with this new idea of saying, "Hey, we're developing innovation." One thing that can be an issue is like, I don't feel creative, right? Like I just I don't feel like I have anything creative inside of me right now. I kind of am doing par for the course, and maybe I wish I was being more creative and I wish I was doing more fun stuff, but that juice is not coming to me. Right. And so we just wanted to share some ideas kind of as we're making these changes, to talk a little bit about some possible ways to build some creativity for yourself. So, Esol, I don't know if you want to start.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was constantly thinking about was how I felt left out when I was in Japan, checking Twitter and, people trying new things out and you talking about this cool new whatever. And I'm just like, I can't use that. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that you don't need to do what everyone else is raging about right now. If you're not feeling like now's the time or that you have the space to try something new out, you have to try it because you want to and because you see a need for it and because you're going to be excited to use it. And that's one of the things that I thought, well, you know what, even if I learn this right now and take this Saturday course when I'm free, what am I going to use it for? Mm-hmm. Am I excited? No, it just feels like a chore. And so you have to remind yourself, you don't have to do all of these things.
Right.
It's not a race.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I'll kind of add on to that too, because I think a lot of times maybe we find something and we're like, oh, everybody already knows about that, so I shouldn't get very excited about it or whatever it is, right? And so for you, it might be like Google Docs, for example. You're like, hey, I finally kind of saw Google Docs. I finally figured it out, right? But I'm behind because everybody was talking about that however many years ago, right? And so there's no new ideas going on in that. But it doesn't matter, right? Like, because it's for you. You're the one who's saying, hey, this is for me right now, and this is what I'm figuring out, and it does help my students, and it does help me do my work. And so I think that like it's very, very tempting for a lot of us to try to be on what's hot, like the newest releases or all of those types of things. But I'm totally with you there. It doesn't matter, Like we try and tell our students this all the time, right? You don't need to compare yourselves to the other students, right?
Yeah,
Like their
absolutely.
English level, and you don't need to compare your techie or
Yeah.
creativity levels to other people
Yeah,
as
you
well.
don't need to memorize the AWL like that other student has down. It's not a race.
Right.
You need take what you can for what you need at that time for whatever it is. And with that, just take a break and go back to basics. I think that's what happened to me in Japan. It was a forced break off of technology. I actually had no Wi-Fi in my classroom, and that's just standard where I was, which also meant I was weaned off of social media and I learned to live without it. I learned not to check my phone during breaks, and taking a break and just going back to basics helps us to stay in touch with the reason why we need tools. It's because we need to make learning accessible. It's not about the trendy gadget. It's not about all of these things that suddenly popped up in the last 3 years because of at-home teaching or online teaching. And so that's one thing that I realized. I thought, hey, I'm back to basics, and it's not a bad thing. This is actually great.
Right. Yeah. I like that too, because it's kind of gets you into the idea. We talk about this, but it's like that would help you look for the tool that fits the teaching, not the teaching that fits the tool. Right.
Yes.
And so instead of, it's like, hey, I found this thing and how am I going to use it in the classroom? It's like, well, if that's the question, then you're not starting with the pedagogy, right? Like what are the students' goals for learning, or what is your your outcome, your intended outcomes, or whatever else it is, right? Because we get so tied up in, I want to use this fun thing. I think it's going to be fun for the students. Yeah.
And then I was going to add that, when I was in Japan, I was also training teachers. And so one of the thoughts that I would constantly was ruminating about was, it doesn't matter how many digital strategies I have, not one of them is going to be useful for these teachers, because the reality for them is that they have to remain here and these Japanese teachers have to teach in this environment. So how am I going to make that learning accessible, those tools accessible to them, or what tools am I going to make accessible to them so they can then actually use them? Because I can wow them with everything that Google Docs can do, but they don't have internet access on their location, at their location. So
yeah, absolutely. So next up, I think for maintaining your creativity or building your creativity, it kind of goes in two different ways, right? So when you're saying yes or no to things, you have to know when to say yes to things that you can try and when to say no. So if you're dealing with burnout, for example, you have to be a lot more willing to say no to things, right? Like, no, I'm not going to do this. No, I'm not going to do that. And I think it's okay to say no to things that people invite you or ask you to do. And on the other hand, you also want to be willing to say yes to things when you maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable with it, right? And I don't mean in the sense of like, I can't handle more on my plate. If that's the problem, then say no, as I mentioned. But if you're saying, well, hey, somebody's asking me to be a co-presenter on this thing, and I don't feel confident in that, or I'm being asked to help out with this event that I've never done before, and I don't know how to do it, right? So you can choose these different things that might be new experiences, and then those new experiences, the ones that you do take, can be like opening your eyes to a lot of different options and different ways to think about things. And so my best advice for this, I know this is kind of informal, but it's just trust your gut, right? Like you say.
That, Brent, that is like the single most valuable thing that I've learned and actually applied. Your gut knows. Trust your gut. Your gut knows.
Yeah. So when you get that, like, go for it, right? And it's different than being nervous, right? Like,
it's different.
Yeah, but yeah. So I think the when to say yes or no can be a really good one.
And that might take some practice, especially if you're used to saying yes to things that you're expected to say yes, or you think you're expected to say yes or no to. Trust your gut. You've got to practice in real life, and the only way to do that is to do it, to practice. Well, another thing that I came upon to stay, to stay creative is to read a completely unrelated book, not about work, not about education, not about, because one of the things that I'm constantly ordering things that I see people share with each other because they're such great reads. But then the thing is it becomes not a chore, but I feel like I'm behind. I haven't finished that book and I haven't finished that book. And,
Right.
and then I realized, but it's about work. And yes, I enjoy work, but work cannot, I know that us who love our job, we say like we love it and it's almost like a hobby because we're refining, we love it so much, but work cannot be your hobby.
Right.
Because at some point you become your work.
Right.
And your work cannot define who you are, because God forbid your work be taken away from you, then who are you? And you are not your work.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's just a big thought.
I'm with you, right? Like, and that unrelated book can be like a good way to guide you into like your other interests that maybe you're not sure about, right? Maybe you don't totally know what other things you're interested in, especially if you've gotten so tied up in your work.
Workaholic. Yes. If you're one of those people who is like the director of whatever, the chairperson for whatever, the volunteer for the one that people want on their team all the time to lead. Yeah, you're constantly you're in high demand because of your expertise, but what that does is it's also draining. It's draining you, and you've got to, there will be no emergency if you say no to something.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you less of a person or more of a person. And so that's one thing that just read something. I was reading stuff that weird, just comedy stuff or stuff that I normally don't read because I'm not interested in it for entertainment. I usually watch Netflix, but it also sort of made me pause and sort of explore like what are the other things I like that are not related to education, because I'm just so my body is so conditioned to being a teacher. My brain's conditioned.
Yeah, and like we want to link everything we do back to it and like think of ways that it can help our students. But one of the ways that we can help our students is by, taking care of ourselves too, right? And so, so I'm going to link that too, because you said read an unrelated book, and I would also say just find a totally unrelated hobby, right? So reading books, of course, can be part of that, but it could be something like I'm going to learn to play the guitar, right? Or I'm actually kind of interested. I don't know if I'm going to be able to work this out, but next semester at our school, there's a new class being offered called Introduction to Beekeeping. And so, and I'm like,
my cousins just started that.
Really?
Something, yes.
And I'm like, that's just totally
awesome.
different.
Totally different.
Yeah. And it's like, like you could just kind of be out there in nature. Obviously I don't want to get stung a bunch, but I'm interested. Right. I'm like, that sounds like a kind of a cool thing. So just unrelated, doesn't have to do anything with all the other stuff I'm doing, but it's just something that I want to go learn about maybe, or see if I want to learn about it too. Right. So that unrelated hobby can be real big.
But here's the thing, Brent, and I think we talk about this, with our students. We tell them, go read about this, go do that, go do something different. So you're learning. We, as we get older, we also get stuck in our own little groups of like-minded individuals. And so once you venture out of that comfort zone, because yes, it's harder as an adult to venture out, then you start seeing things differently. And as a beekeeper, you're going to be learning about the environment, how that's, how taking care of bees impacts a lot of our everyday life. And when are you going to, of course, you might learn about that in a lecture in one of those textbooks that we get, but you're now personally connected to it. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
My hobby that I was telling you that I might pick up is learning how to do nails.
Oh yeah. You mentioned that.
I did mention that. And well, it's still an idea, a pipe dream.
Okay. So you're still pursuing the first steps.
Yeah. So I would also suggest journaling. I know we tell our students to journal. We ask them to journal here and there, but journaling can also show patterns of how much of a workaholic you've become, because you might be journaling about things that are stressing you out, or you might realize that you're not able to write anything down because all you can think about is work, or other things, and that, how many work related thoughts you're having becomes evident. But journaling about things that make you happy, or journaling about the little moments of the day that you were grateful for, worrying about the past and the future is useless because they are both not the present. They're not here. But one of the practices that I've been following now for about a year and a half is I just have this little journal, and it doesn't have to be long pages, but it's just moments that made me smile today. And if there aren't any, then you write none. That's the reality. You don't have to, but things I'm grateful for today. And sometimes I'm grateful for something like my toast or my toaster, or that the coffee, the Starbucks person was really kind. And sometimes yeah.
Have you seen that Japanese toaster that does the with the water? You pour water in the top of it, and then we'll talk about this later. This is a whole thing.
This is your fun.
No, it's not my fun find, but it's pretty amazing. And
we need to add weird finds.
Oh yeah. Well, if I ever buy it, it's expensive. It's an expensive toaster, but it's super cool. So, okay. So you could be happy about your toast. You could journal about just journaling. Journal. Yeah, any kind of journaling too. Because
let out that energy.
Yeah, and it gets your brain in that flow state, right? Like once you get into that. So, so I think another way I'm going to add in get bored, right? We've talked, there are articles out there about the value of boredom, and one of these I found, there was an article by Elpidero, I think, and it's called "The Bright Side of Boredom." We'll put the link into the show notes. But one of the quotes that kind of came through, and pulling from a few different studies, said, "In broad strokes, the picture is as follows: on account of its effective volitional and cognitive aspects, boredom motivates the pursuit of a new goal when the current goal ceases to be satisfactory, attractive, or meaningful to the agent." So the boredom can actually, when you let yourself live in that boredom, then it can actually be the prompt that gets you out of boredom, right? And gets you into like whatever your next passion, your next joy, your next goal is going to be. And so for me, a couple of the ways that we might talk about it, and I think this is hard for a lot of us, is like, when you do something like go out on a walk in nature, right? So many people pop their headphones in. It's like the first thing they do. Pop the headphones in, listen to a podcast, listen to music, go for the run, whatever it is. And that's totally fine. But what happens if you go without your headphones, right? Like, what if you just have your feet and nature, right? And like you just and you go out and explore and listen to what nature is saying, and how the wind is blowing, and how the birds are tweeting, and all of these different things, right?
Birds are tweeting.
The birds
they tweet now.
Yeah, that's where Twitter that's what Twitter comes from. Yeah. You didn't know that everybody who tweets on Twitter is a bird. Yeah, but again, like going out there without anything, right? Just being a part of nature, and that can, it can be for some people certainly are listening right now and they're going, "That's not boring, that's super fun," and it's like, yes, but not for the people who are not used to that, right? So the people who are like, I always have to have something going through my ears. There's always something, right? And so it's like, well, let's step away from that. And so another way to do that too is to leave your phone behind, right? So if you're going to a coffee shop, leave your phone in the car, or maybe at home, right? And it's funny because my dad does this all the time. So like when I go visit my dad, and we'll be out and I'll be like, "Oh, like what about this?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. I left my phone on the counter at home." And I'm like, "You forgot it?" And he's like, "No, I left it." It's like, oh yeah, you can do that, I guess, right? You can actually choose to just be out in the moments that you're in the moments for. Again, same type of thing. So if you're at a coffee shop and you're intentionally setting yourself up, you say, "Hey, I don't have a book, I don't have a tablet, I don't have a phone. I'm just gonna sit here, enjoy the coffee, maybe people watch, maybe just kind of be in the environment," right? And again, that can all lead you to see things that you wouldn't have seen or heard otherwise.
Oh yeah, Brent. One of the things that I did that, as a result of not having Wi-Fi is I realized I had the habit of just grabbing my phone. Even if I wasn't going to check it, I would grab it and take it with me. And I learned to leave my phone behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so on my way to the cafeteria is quite a walk from my classroom. And I would be checking my phone if I had, if I was able to. But I was forced to watch, listen, hear, look, exp- feel the sensation of the wind. I know that sounds really cheesy, but there were things like that that I now could really have my attention on. And I learned to appreciate, the sound of the water of the river that's nearby, or the birds are not singing today. What's going on? Oh, it's winter is coming. So that must be it. And so stuff like that. And then for those of us that like to go out running and block everyone, so people don't talk to us with our headphones,
Mm-hmm.
I also started leaving my phone behind, but I still didn't want people to talk to me, and I was still a little bit shy. So I just would wear my sport headphones,
Mm-hmm.
but no sound. And then I could just sit there and people watch. And then I learned that there were couples that would come around and feed the cats in the neighborhood. And because I was watching, otherwise I would have blocked it because of the music. And the thing is, it slows your thoughts down, which means you have to be alone with your thoughts. And that's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you run away from them, they show up elsewhere. So I think that's a great, great, great suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one, kind of tying that into like slowing down your thoughts or being together with your thoughts, is that there was another study that's by McPherson, and it was called Emotional Intent Modulates the Neural Substrates of Creativity, an fMRI study of emotionally targeted improvisation in jazz musicians. And that's a long title, but it was really interesting because basically what they were doing is they're saying like, hey, if we prompt people before they do their creative music, I think they were jazz pianists, and if we prompt people with like positive emotions before that, does that create more creativity? And what they found is that it does. And so the implication here is that you can actually do things like watch a comedy, or pursue something joyful, like a beautiful positive piece of art, and that can actually open you up to better and to more creativity. And so I think that's kind of part one. And then the other thing I think that a lot of us don't do is like, we feel that moment of motivation. And I don't know if you've ever been in this moment, Michelle, when you're like, oh, this is a really good idea. This is a thing that I want to do. And then you trick yourself and you go, maybe I'll do it tomorrow. Right. But it's like, if you feel that in that moment, strike while the iron's hot, right? Like if you're like, hey, I'm ready to do this thing, I've got a little bit of the motivation, because that's like the first, the snowball effect, right? And then if you actually get into it and you start building it. So like I've had a few times where I'm like, hey, I really want to make this video for my students. And then I'm like, yeah, but I want to do it later, I guess. And then I never do it, right? But then I've had other times where I'm like, hey, I want to do this. And I'm like, I've got time right now. I'm just going to put in 10 minutes into it. And then 3 hours later, I'm like, okay, cool. I've got this final product, right? But it's cool because that's time that I would have done, otherwise sitting on the sofa or something that I would have never ended up getting to at another point.
Hey, Brent, how about that book you're writing?
Summer. next time in a few weeks. Give me some time here.
Yes. And that brings me to my last suggestion, in that it is okay to pause something for a few days or a few months. And in my case, it happened to be a couple months. And in Brent's book case, it might be a year. And that is okay. You have to give yourself permission to that. That is okay. There will never be, as I view it, an Esol emergency. But there can be a health emergency, and there's only one you, and without you, then it becomes an Esol emergency. But you have to remind yourself of that you come first. If you're not, feeling your best, then at that time you need to take a break. Trust your gut. I think your gut will tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully some of these help if you're thinking about some ways to rebuild or get back into the creative mode for yourself and for your career as well.
It is time for our fun finds. And this time around, well, I'm still missing Japan. So I'm going to recommend a Japanese fun find.
Okay.
And these are B-side, B, the letter B, and then side, as in like SIDE side. B-side label stickers. And these are stickers, bumper stickers. They've morphed into like, I think they have cases and keychains now because they're so popular, but they're pop art stickers, and originally were from Osaka. I think they started out in 2003, but they have just, you can find them online, but in Japan they have stores where you can walk in. And I always, come out with a bunch of stickers. And this time around I think they had created a Ukraine sticker. So it was just based on donations. You didn't have to purchase it. Just take the sticker and donate whatever you want. And you can it's like, we like those what are they called? Pop art, pop pop.
Oh, the Funko Pops.
Funko Pops. Okay, Funko Pops. So imagine that, but the sticker version.
Okay.
And so there's millions of characters, and yeah, you can find anything. So they're a lot of fun. So
nice. Yeah, and we have a lot of listeners who are sticker collectors.
Yeah, these are great for sticker collectors.
Okay, cool. I like it. So here's mine. Dun, 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 dun.
Is this a weird fun? Oh, this is cool.
This is so cool. Fun. Yeah. So this is, and that made for great radio right there. Just a reminder for everybody. So cool. Wasn't that amazing? Wasn't that reveal excellent? No. So Esol, you got me a gift from Japan, which is
I did.
It's a charger, and I love it. It's like, so it's such a cool, and it's a nicely designed little charger. It's just like the cube, right? It's a little cube, not a cube. I mean,
it's a cube.
It's called a cube, but it's a flat cube, right? So it's got this it's like
it's
a good
about
palm
like
size.
an inch, and is it like an inch thick, an inch and a half? What would you say?
It's pretty, like an inch thick, probably 3 by 3 by 1, I would say. So probably an inch thick, but it's a nice little, it's the kind of the perfect weight. So, and it's got this really good quality little rope on it. But the thing that I like about it is that it is it's also a wireless charger, right? Mm-hmm. And so since I've upgraded my phone, I hadn't thought about it, and I'm like, oh, I just still always charge traditionally, and I'm like, oh, now my phone actually can do wireless charging, and so this is kind of the perfect little thing. So I can have it in my bag, it's charged. I could just stick my phone next to it or put it together on the on the table or whatever it is. It does still have the cords for plugging in, so it has the the USB slots in it, but I you can never go wrong with the charger, first of all. So I'm stoked on having it, but also I like the wireless function and just the simple, clean design. So mine is, I guess it's called Power Cube Pro. I don't QI.
Yeah, those QI is Qi, the power. Qi. That's the Qi is for all of the wireless. That's the type of wireless technology.
Okay.
So cool. Welcome to the wireless technology
revolution
era.
As I wear my wired headphones and talk into my wired microphone.
Yeah, no, I regret not going back and getting one for myself.
You'll have to go back to Japan, I guess. That's the only answer.
I will have to go back to Japan. Yes, but yes, I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very cool one. So we'll see if we can find it. I don't know if people can get it here, but we'll at least put a link so people can see what it is.
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening to the show, and welcome back from our hiatus. We are still giving away our pins, so leave us reviews. If you're doing any kind of shout out, please tag us on social media. We're on all the platforms.
Yeah. We also have a Patreon if you want to support the show. We have a buy us a coffee on there too. So if you feel like, hey, this is worth supporting, then that would be awesome. But of course, we're just happy to have you listening. So you can find show notes and other episodes at diesel.org/61, so /61. And of course, you can listen to us at VoiceEd Canada. That's voiced.ca. The show we're still on Twitter, so we don't know if I guess we haven't decided how we feel about Twitter potentially being bought. I mean, he said Elon Musk,
wasn't it bought?
Kind of, but he can still back out until the very last minute. So we're still in he's saying yes that he's going to buy it, but there's still a back out clause, which might end up happening. So anyways, regardless, we're on Twitter at DiesolPod, DIESOLPOD, and I am at Brent G. Warner.
I am Ishel at ixy_pixie. That's IXY_PIXY.
And for the whole creativity side of things, we're going to do a whole made-up language. So in Esperanto, thank you is Dankon. Dankon for tuning in to the Diesel podcast.
Woohoo!
Thanks, everybody.
See you.